back from a short hiatus and ready to roll. Welcome to the Pulse with Peter B. I'm your host, Peter Bianca, and this is your one-stop shop for sports picks, politics and government chatter, and even some neighborhood restaurant reviews. And we are here in front of Pier 13, where we did a show a few weeks ago with Daria DeLucia trying all the food trucks. But it's a beautiful fall morning, and why don't we begin with our picks with Peter B segment? And joining us, and we're so happy to have him back, is Mr. Jay Sinatra, former SNY sports betting analyst. Mr. Sinatra, what's going on? Welcome back.
Mr. Sinatra, Jay's okay. Thanks for having me back. I love the set. This is beautiful, beautiful morning. Let's roll, baby.
Exactly. We're getting a little sun here. You got your tracksuit out. Did you do a little workout this morning?
No work. I just got over here. Look at you all dressed up. You're all you're going to a big executive meeting with Tom Grossman and Billy Jacobs. Let's go.
Maybe. Yeah. Exactly. I like that. I like that a lot. Well, why don't we jump right in? Because
let's jump.
Listen, we could do jumping jacks if you want. I don't care. We're fired up this morning, baby. I was going to say, you're certainly
I had enough caffeine. I'm ready to run across the water.
I got to keep the armpits less sweaty. Anyway, so last week, of course, was week 1 in the NFL, and it was a gambler's paradise, let's just say, correct? But there were some surprises, and there were some people that were a little shocked at some of the outcomes. What shocked you?
I mean, as far as the betting perspectives go, there were 3 games where everybody seemed to be all over. Philadelphia Eagles was one of them. The Cleveland Browns, there was big expectations for them in the offseason with your boy Beckham and Big Mouth Baker and all that. And then the Denver Broncos. Those are 3 big public plays that all of the gamblers, they think they have the inside knowledge and everything. They're going to make all kinds of money because of the Antonio Brown fiasco and the Eagles. I mean, the spread actually in that game against the Redskins went from 8.5 to 10, and I do believe there was a jump in that game because the money was on the Eagles. And then the other game.
So when you say a jump in that game, what does that mean? I'm just curious.
Well, that spread opened at 8.5.
Okay.
And then I don't like to use that strategy often.
Okay.
Because they are a lot smarter than the public, and they move the lines up and down and every which way, not necessarily based on where the money's going. They try to trick people and throw you off of any kind of strategy and setups that you have week to week that run parallel with one another. That game, I do believe, went up because of the public money. So that opened at 8.5, went up to 10. And, of course, the Eagles, they get out. They're down 17-0 right out of the gate. They end up coming back, winning the game. The Redskins got a late score to get a backdoor cover, and I think the number landed on 5. So all the Eagle money went down.
So wait a minute. The odds makers look at how much money is coming in for a game, and then that's how they change their spreads?
Sometimes.
Really interesting.
They manipulate the lines sometimes that way. But other times
Is it because they try to make money, more money,
they try to get bets on both sides. That's normally how it works. But they try to manipulate the public, too.
Interesting.
For the longest time when I was younger and I used to pick games, I used to follow when the line went up, and I used to try to be sharp and always bet the dog against the public money. And that always doesn't work out. So put that game aside. The other game, the Browns, they were a 5.5-point favorite against Tennessee. Everybody's all over the Baker, Odell hype. The Browns got good odds to go to the Super Bowl. They're under win total, I believe, was about 8.5, 9. Everybody's firing on that. What happens? They get destroyed
at home, right?
43 to 13. I think that game was a 30-point game. They never had a prayer in that one.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, now week 2 is just around the corner here. Obviously, we're airing right before the week 2 matchups here. Let's start with those New York Giants, huh? The New York Giants, they're taking on the Buffalo Bills. At home. Buffalo didn't even have to leave. Of course, Buffalo with the big win last week against the New York Jets, who just basically laid down and died.
Yeah, we'll get to them in a second.
Absolutely. We'll cover the Jets in a little bit. We certainly will. What do you think of this game from a gambling perspective?
I mean, look, let's go back to last week. I mean, everybody's all. First of all, that spread was 7.5, depending on where you got it.
The Cowboy-Giants spread.
Yes,
correct.
And you're a big Cowboy guy, so
he's outing me.
I mean, no, but that's okay. But you had to listen to it all the time, all preseason. The Daniel Jones nonsense, and all these Giant fans fired up because he's running, all the way down touchdown drives in preseason games against defenses that are comparable to the school for the deaf. And I mean, everybody's getting all fired up, and Saquon's this and everything. They go out, they look good on their first drive in that game, and they get their doors blown off.
Right.
They don't have a single person that resembles an impact player on defense. As far as their offense goes, I mean, they get in all these short yardage situations and they go against using Barkley. So Shermer, I mean, he did it a few times last year. I remember the game at Philadelphia. They were up big at the half, and he just goes against the game plan. For some odd reason, he's clueless. I don't like him. I don't like Gettleman. I don't like anything about that organization right now. And Dallas, Prescott looks like Tom Brady or Joe Montana. He's just going up and down, up and down.
Highest passer rating that you can get.
Yeah, I mean,
week.
you know,
exactly.
he's claiming a case for that big contract that he's looking for.
Right.
So put that aside. Let's move it forward now. That game, the Giants opened up a 3-point favorite, 2.5 3-point favorite in the offseason. Now, since the way they looked on opening day, and, you know, Buffalo had that nice win, a comeback. We'll get to that in a second. That line's moved. That swung some places 4.5 points. And now the Bills are favored in that game 1.5. Okay?
Interesting.
Yeah, so you went from Giants 2.5, 3, and that swung all the way around to Bills -1.5. And
Does that happen a lot? Or?
I mean, that's a big line move. I mean, that's a line move that's usually due to something that has to do with an injury or a substitution change or something. That's a big line move.
Okay.
Or like a game day, maybe weather situation. You'll have something like that happen and move the over-under, total points for the game.
Well, why don't we start talking about the New York Jets, huh? Because they had a debacle last week, an absolute debacle. And let me tell you something. You want to talk about Giant fans talking about how great Daniel Jones was in the preseason. What was it, the second snap, by the way, that he fumbled against those Dallas Cowboys last week? I think it was the second
You
or
love
third
it,
snap.
don't you? You can't get enough of it.
I absolutely love
Keep
it.
sticking that knife in.
I absolutely love it. Anyway, the New York Jets debacle. They were up 16-0. Buffalo came back, scored 17 unanswered, of course, which Mr. Josh Allen as their quarterback. But, Jay, you have to admit, this Leslie Frazier defense of the Buffalo Bills was pretty good last week. Now they take on the Cleveland Browns, who also had a debacle last week. What is the line telling you in this game?
Well, the Jet line, you know, it's interesting enough. And we were talking, when we were talking about setting up a time and date and logistics for this show, we were talking about doing it yesterday.
We were.
And if we did do it yesterday, before this announcement, Sam Darnold got mono. He's out of this game now. I think he's going to be. I'm no doctor. I mean, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a doctor. But I mean, you know, from what I've read up about this, you know, you got to be really careful. The liver, the spleen. There's a lot of different things you got to factor in when having this. It's also very contagious. I don't think he'll be making out with any players, but, you know, in the locker room, so on and so forth.
Well, listen, it's a new generation of players here.
But anyway, as far as the line went, you know, this spread opened up at 2.5 Cleveland. So Cleveland was coming in on the road off of their horrible loss. So that's ultra disrespect for the Jets. A home game against a team that lost by 30 that has all this expectations. Mayfield, you know, we spoke about Mayfield and Beckham and all these mouthy guys that have done nothing, but they have a lot of hype for them. They're actually coming into here as a favorite. Now they make that Darnold announcement. Then they were talking about Le'Veon Bell. He needed an MRI. The linebacker, I forgot his name. The big linebacker that had a big game for them, Mosley.
Right?
Is he? I'm not sure if he's questionable or what his situation is for Monday. That line went from 2.5 to 6.5, a 4-point hop. So what is
going on here?
Well, now that is a legitimate move. Because what we were speaking about before,
Darnold, right, makes sense. Yeah.
What we were speaking about before in terms of the Bills and the Giants move, that's a move based on performance. This is a move based on performance. The Jets don't have a place kicker. Hey, buddy, you want a place kick for the Jets on Monday? They're in all kinds of trouble. Forget about they don't have a kicker. They don't have a quarterback. It's a Jets
thing.
We're
recruiting here on the Pulse Fight Live right here in Hoboken, New Jersey, baby.
It's a Jets thing. It's always a Jets thing. It's always an organizational thing. They're a cursed franchise. So that line's moved from 2.5 to 6.5. The Browns are actually near 3-1 on the money line now, just to win the game. So you'd have to lay. I think the exact number I saw on one of the apps, I don't know if it was DraftKings or FanDuel or William Hill. I take a peek at all of them. It's a good thing to look at different sports books and even have accounts on multiple ones. Sometimes you get better lines on the side that you want to play with. DraftKings was I think minus 285, I think the number was. I've seen some 300s floating around, but the Browns are a pretty favorable favorite in this game.
Well, here we go. Meadowlands, Monmouth, Atlantic City, whatever you want. The Browns.
When are we going? You owe me dinner at Atlantic City.
I owe you more than dinner, trust me.
Yeah, let's go.
Because I did pretty well on my first week, thanks to Mr. Jay Sinatra. Let me tell you. Folks, Jay will actually be back with us on our last segment, but when we come back, it's our Politics with Peter B segment from Our Lady of Grace Auditorium and the Eminent Domain Abuse Town Hall. You're not going to, the first part of it, of a 4-part series, you're not going to want to miss it. But Jay, you swear you're going to be back for the last segment?
I'm coming back.
He's coming back,
baby. I might go hang out with the dogs over there.
He's going to go hang out with the dogs. Look at him. Here he goes. Barking. He knows Cleveland is coming to town.
I'm fired
He's got the
up. Let's
barking.
go.
He's
I'm going
fired
over to
up.
the dog park
We
over
will
there.
be right back, folks.
All right.
For 30 years, New York Waterway has been a trusted friend of the city of Hoboken by enhancing the everyday commute for thousands of city residents and by always answering the call during emergencies big and small. Now that reliability and comfort the ferries offer is in jeopardy. The Union Dry Dock facility is vital to the ferry's existence. You don't have to choose between reliable transportation and parkland. Learn the truth. New York Waterway and Hoboken are better together. Visit nywaterway.com/truth.
Peter Bianca, your hostess with the mostest of the Pulse with Peter B. And we are joined by none other than Jake Bianca. If you're ever in my parents' great Italian deli, you'll probably see him hanging outside or when the deli is closed. And Jake wants to remind you, he told me he wants to remind you to make sure you follow us at our new Instagram page, and that's at The Pulse with Peter B. Make sure you like and follow us on Facebook by typing in The Pulse with Peter B in your search bar. And Jake also wanted me to let you know, because he tells me he watches it all the time, to go and binge watch our past episodes of The Pulse on YouTube by subscribing to our network. Jake, do you got anything to say? Nothing to say from Jake. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Welcome back to The Pulse with Peter B. I'm your host, Peter Bianca, and we are here at Our Lady of Grace Auditorium, and we want to thank Father Alex Santora for inviting us for this special Politics with Peter B segment. And joining us is, of course, our political analyst, that's Josh Sotomayor-Einstein, Natalia Iati, I'm sorry if I'm making you a mistake on your name there. She is a community activist in Jersey City, and Mary Andreka, a community activist here in Hoboken. Thank you all for joining us for this very, very important discussion on eminent domain. And we're going to have a 3-part series on this. You're going to see part 2 next week and part 3 the following week. But why don't we jump right into this town hall style meeting with our first question. And of course, we'll start with Josh first, and then we'll just kind of go down the line here. So Josh, and Natalia, and Mary, how has eminent domain affected you?
So on a personal level, I've never been the victim of larger forces of the government or any element of the government attempting to take any sort of my property. But as a resident of New Jersey, and unfortunately our state abuses eminent domain regularly, I've seen people's private property been taken away from them. And it doesn't matter if I like what they're doing with their property or not, or if I have a preference for what the property should become. The fact is, if my neighbor doesn't have property rights, then I don't have property rights, and that's a problem.
I'm just going to continue what Josh said. My name is Natalia Ioffi. I'm from Jersey City, and in 2014, my husband and I bought a mixed-use property, which is also our home in Jersey City, only to subsequently find out sometime later that it is in a redevelopment plan, in which the Jersey City Redevelopment Agency has designated it for potential acquisition by the city, which ultimately means eminent domain, complete with relocation of residents if necessary. And this involves not just my home, but also a series of homes on Center Street, of which is our block association. So it has certainly affected me personally, and it is a very personal struggle for us presently.
Well, I can actually say my family has been a victim of eminent domain. My grandparents, which came from Slovakia and settled in New York and came to New Jersey, back in the 60s, the highways was one of a very good reason to eminent domain, as well as hospitals and schools. And their property, they wanted to put a highway through some of it, and they ended up taking all of it. And it was tragic because, in many respects, it destroyed not only that generation but the following. And their home still stands, but a government worker lives in it. The highway is not in view of the house. They could have just taken a portion of the land, and it took them off the land, it took them out of the state, and my grandfather couldn't speak English, my grandmother could, and so it was also bittersweet because my grandparents were cheated when their house was being built by a contractor back in the 40s, and they had to go to court, and it's in Asbury Park Press. I found this out just about a year ago. So they went through all this trouble. They spent the $10,000 they put down. They finally got it settled. They won. They built their house because the house they had on the property had fallen down, and the government took it anyway. I find that so heartbreaking, and I cannot take eminent domain of any kind because there's such a destruction. It's trading one owner for another, and that's why it is painful to see this happening anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our next question, and then before our finals question, I am actually going to call for volunteers from the audience in case anybody has any questions for our panelists to come up to me and speak in the mic for any type of question they have. Are New Jersey's eminent domain laws applied too widely in scope? Why don't we start with you, Mary, this time?
Well, I do believe that because there's sort of a broad definition of eminent domain now. Yes, parks are a public use, but a lot of the roads have been built, a lot of the hospitals are now being combined, a lot of the schools, there's really not that much need for it, in my opinion. Plus, everyone hurts. Someone is going to pay a price with the taking of the land. Obviously, it goes way back because it happened to my grandparents in this state of New Jersey. But to just blatantly use it, as our town has blatantly used it, and this is another example on next Wednesday when they tend to vote to be able to use it again, yes, I do believe it is. It's just very damaging, and I can only imagine what you're going through in that time. I really can, so I do believe it is.
I can expand on that with regard to Jersey City, specifically what it has become. If any of you are familiar with the 2005 Kilo v. New London Supreme Court case of the eminent domain, where Supreme Court has ultimately decided against the homeowner and in favor of the city that wanted to develop the land on which several homes stood, that set a terrible precedent for people like us. And one of the justices involved, he called it reverse Robin Hood. He was the one dissenting opinion. And so if you take this concept of reverse Robin Hood, and that is ultimately what is happening around us and what we've been seeing for the past decade in our city, is that when an agency, a government agency, designates an area for redevelopment, quote unquote, it can mean economic improvement, it can mean anything, but ultimately what ends up happening is that the residents of that area, and there's almost always some kind of residents, they fall under immense pressure from the government officials and surrounding community members, however they choose to work it. But ultimately, the area gets designated to either a single developer preferred by the local government or even a series of local developers preferred by the local government. But the residents almost always get kind of the lower end of the bargain. And what ends up happening is that this land just transfers ownership, as you have mentioned, and the resident loses. And so then the developer comes in, builds whatever they have to build, regardless of what it ends up being, but they profit from the procedure, and the residents do not, and that's the bottom line.
So I would say first, there is a donation box if anybody want to donate to the Center Street Block Association, Natalia's neighborhood, in its battle against the city's eminent domain designs on that neighborhood and its unfortunate efforts to push people out. But I would say 100%. Eminent domain is too widely and broadly used for the whims of the political ruling class, whether it's to erase the current residents of a neighborhood, as in Jersey City in Natalia's case, and replace them with many more residents that are by definition, be mostly newcomers, would be new to the political scene, and would just worship at the altar of whoever built their development. And then in the case of Hoboken, it's a special interest. There's a tiny minority of town that wants to take away the property rights of a public good, of a company that is about mass transit, and that serves 32,000 commuters or more across northern New Jersey, for another park along the waterfront. If you want to use eminent domain for a military base, for national security, for an electrical substation, or for a water reservoir, something that we all need to survive, at least in theory, there's an argument for it. If you want to use eminent domain for a want, like a park, I want a park too. But my wants should not dictate what other people are allowed to do with their rights. And when we infringe on everyone's universal individual rights, it's a slippery slope, it's a bad direction, and we don't need it in our state.
Well, thank you. Thank you to Josh, Natalia, and Mary. Folks, they will be back here next week for part 2 of a 3-part segment on eminent domain. You're going to want to join in then. We will be right back.
New York Waterway values the rich history of Hoboken's working waterfront and the modern-day importance of preserving green space. Plans for our Union Dry Dock facility will incorporate the best of both, with a state-of-the-art ferry maintenance facility and expanded public use of the waterfront, with a promenade, fishing pier, and kayak landing. You don't have to choose between reliable transportation and parkland. Learn the truth. New York Waterway and Hoboken are better together. Visit nywaterway.com/truth.
Welcome back to the Postal Peter Urbina. I'm your host, Peter Bianca, and this is our bonus, as promised, pick segment. Still joined by former SNY betting analyst. Who's boarding?
We're boarding the ship.
I was going to say, betting analyst, Mr. Jay Sinatra. Thank you for staying. We really appreciate it. Jay, we forgot to do one thing in segment 1, and that was give out some awards. Can you give out some awards?
I'm giving out awards.
Please?
This is a new thing we're going to do on the Pulse. See, we're going to give out the underdogs of the week. And last week we had 2 big ones. We had 1 double-digit points. And what we like to do to reward our dogs, we're not cheap here on the Pulse. We give awards out to the biggest underdogs. That would be the Washington Redskins, +10 against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Woo!
And then
there they go, folks.
The Seattle Seahawks, they were a 9-point favorite against Cincinnati. Cincinnati covered that game. The Seahawks won 21-20. Seahawks get the win, but the Bengals get the dog treat.
The dog treat?
I'll go.
Do
you want one of these?
No,
okay, that's it. We'll save them. We'll save some more for next week.
Folks,
guys, we're coming to bring you some dog treats in a little bit.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There was a dog part, but there was no harming of any dogs by the throwing of the dog treats, and they're enjoying it right now.
These things aren't bad.
Are they? Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, then put some fresh mutts on one.
Oh, fresh mutts it out.
Let's go.
The best deli in town, M&P Bianca. There's a shameless plug, Greg. There's a shameless plug. All right,
let's go.
Let's continue on week 2. So we have many, many great matchups in week 2, but I think the matchup from a gambling perspective that I found more interesting when looking at the line was Miami versus New England.
Without question.
Why?
Well, you're looking at maybe one of the biggest road favorites of all time. New England goes into Miami. First of all, every time, Miami's been a house of horrors for New England. I believe Miami's covered like 6 in a row in Miami against New England. They've actually beaten them outright, like 5 of 6 of those or 6 or 7 of those, some crazy number. But every time New England goes down there, they have their hands full. That spread opened up at 16-point New England favorite.
I did see that.
For a road favorite, that's unprecedented. It's the biggest road opening spread since, I believe, San Francisco was a 23-point favorite against the Atlanta Falcons back in 1987 when you had Montana.
I was 2 years old,
and
baby.
Rice and Roger Craig and Rathman and I don't know if John Taylor was there, whatever.
What was the final of that game? Do you remember?
Which one? The Niners?
Yeah, the Niners.
I don't remember.
87.
Come on, I'm much more. I do all the research here. Anyway,
you ought to be like 20 then.
This spread is This spread is currently 18.5 points.
That's
New England favorite. I'm thinking it's going to go to 20, even 21. And it's just an incredibly huge road number. The last time that spread was anything close to that, you had to go back to 2007, and the Patriots, I believe, were an 18.5-point road favorite in Baltimore against the Ravens. So, I mean,
that's incredible.
If that gets to 21, I don't see how you can play that game either way. It's a lot to lay, but they're telling you Miami's complete garbage, which they are. This is a rebuilding year for them as well. And New England's New England. I mean, they just look like they got an opportunity to run the table. So I wouldn't even go near that game on either way. But it is intriguing from the numbers perspective.
It certainly was.
And the money line on that game, you got to lay like $2,500 or so to win 100. if you want to bet New England. So if you want to win $200 on New England straight up, you got to put 5 dimes down. Yeah, 5 dimes.
It's not worth it then. Is it really worth it?
No shot.
Okay,
5 dimes to win 200. Look for another game. But it is intriguing with all the numbers.
Speaking of other games,
go ahead.
Probably the best matchup of the week is New Orleans versus Los Angeles. These are two teams that are predicted to possibly win the Super Bowl, certainly win the NFC Championship. Obviously, only one can do that because they're both in the NFC. What do you think of this line?
A bit of a revenge game here for the Saints, but really the revenge should be taken on the referees that blew that call.
Exactly.
This is, like you said, this is a rematch of the NFC Championship game. The Saints, I believe, were a 3-point favorite in the Superdome in that game. Now the Rams are home, where they really don't have much of a home field advantage, but I don't tie that much into, teams, with players, they've been going on the road home. I mean, the game's a game. I don't believe in home field advantage too much. I don't think that's as important as it was maybe, say, 20 years ago. I don't think there's going to be a ton of Saints fans in the building, where if they were playing the Cowboys, the Steelers, the Packers, one of those teams, their fans would take over LA. And it's 2.5 right now. I expect it to maybe go 3, maybe even going down to 2. I don't think it'll go over that 3-point number, though. Money line, I believe, is around 150, 155, the Rams. So that's like, to win 200 on that game, you'd have to put $300 out. If you like the Rams, if you like the Saints, you'd put $100 down to get plus money back. Would probably be anywhere from like 125 to 130. Who do you like in the game?
If I can give a prediction, you are the insider here, and I am just, what I guess.
Wait a second. Let me think. Wait a second.
Hold on a second. Go ahead. What's your question?
I wanted to put, You want
to put my back against a brick wall?
No, I don't want to put you against a brick wall. But something you know a little bit about.
Yeah.
The Cowboys, they're a 4.5-point favorite. They opened up as a 4.5-point favorite against the Redskins. That line's gone to 6. What do you think about that game?
I don't like that game.
Yeah, because they have problems when they go down to Washington.
100%.
Remember last year they hit the post?
They hit the post. Oh, don't remind me. We were watching it together at my grandmother's after a dish of pasta.
Oh, yeah, the pasta was more memorable than the game. It usually is.
There you go. I don't like that game. I do think you're 100% correct. And also, Kellen Moore has been getting all these accolades. Of course, he's the offensive coordinator, the new offensive coordinator.
I don't even know who that is.
Who looks like he delivers pizza down in Dallas at nighttime. That's exactly what he looks like. I still don't trust in his offense. I think the Cowboys and Jason Garrett, who I'm not a fan of, as you know, they do a very, very good job at preparing for teams.
He's a yes man.
Exactly.
Likes kissing
But
that butt.
they do a very good job of preparing for teams when they have more than a week's preparation for those teams. And they had several weeks
hard hitting analysts right here. Let's go.
For the New York Giants. And the New York Giants are just a bad team. I actually do think the Washington Redskins are a better team, so I don't like that line. But of course, I do like the Cowboys to win the game, and hopefully Brett Maher doesn't hit a poster.
I kind of like the Redskins in that game myself. I mean, that line, like I said, it was 4.5. It went down. It went up to 6. And I think the Redskins usually have a knack for playing them pretty well. Even last year,
it's a rivalry. You know when it's a rivalry.
I don't get caught up in all that nonsense.
I know you don't,
either.
but certainly the players do on the field.
I think that's a bigger thing in college and the NFL. But
okay,
the other thing, and then also Thanksgiving last year, it was a close game. In Dallas, I think, was favored 7.5 in that game.
And Colton McCoy was starting for the Redskins.
They won that game by 8
right.
Because the Redskins decided to go for a field goal for some crazy reason instead of the touchdown late in the game to get the cover. And I'll confess, I'm not one of these guys that doesn't admit when they have losers, because I know everybody's the greatest, better of all time. You go on Twitter, and everybody's a professional. They're taking limousines to work and eating steak and lobster every night. They're all full of baloney. I had the Redskins that game. I lost by 0.5 point. I call it a hook. I was a little sick. I was kind of like bringing up some cranberry sauce and stuffing after that.
Not for my grandmother's cooking.
but that's what happens.
Well, anyway, Jay Sinatra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The energy level is there. We hope to have you back
lay off
in
the
future
caffeine,
episodes.
right?
No, it's absolutely.
More caffeine?
More caffeine, baby. And maybe more dog treats, because I'm sure they were delicious, right?
I love them.
Anyway, folks, thank you for joining us on this week's Pulse. Join us next week for the Pulse on everything you need to know. Have a great week, everybody.